welcome back at 7:49 right now. Congressman Adam Schiff is with us again. Thank you for coming in. We all heard this report that more Americans than ever think that the U.S. is losing the war on terror. There's a new poll that says 40% of those who responded said the terrorists are winning, up 17% over the previous high, which was in 2007. Congressman, you work with this stuff. You're on the Select Committee on Intelligence, ranking member. That's one poll. There are other polls saying 75% of people feel that they fear terrorism. Is that a legitimate feeling? What do you say to your constituents when they tell you this?
I think it's very legitimate, and I think people are wary. It's been 14 years since 9/11, and it's hard to understand why are we still plagued with this threat of terrorism. It was Al-Qaeda, now it's ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Is there any end in sight? And after San Bernardino, people feel particularly that this really hit close to home. So I understand the wariness, I understand the fear. We're doing everything we can possibly do to attack this scourge of terrorism, and in particular the threat now coming from ISIS, which is very real and very present.
You're a Democrat, but you don't always agree with the president. A lot of people feel that the president has had a bit of a tin ear when it comes to responding to the public's needs. Says things like, we have contained them, and then things like San Bernardino.
Or over time, we will defeat them.
Yes.
And your approach is to take a more aggressive stance on this, wouldn't you say?
Well, I would. And the concern that I have, particularly after Paris and San Bernardino, is that if ISIS is allowed to hold that territory in Iraq and Syria, they will attack us in the kind of scale we saw in Paris. So we need to deprive them of their so-called caliphate. Right now, it's hard for them to reach us here in the United States. They do inspire people, as we saw in San Bernardino.
There is an internet caliphate, is there not?
There is.
There is, and it's very pernicious. But that problem really needs to be attacked where it lives, in Syria and Iraq. So I favor more aggressive action, the creation of a safe zone or a no-fly zone, a buffer zone, something that can change the dynamic on the ground. But I will say this, we had a major victory this week in Ramadi as the Iraqi forces retook that major city. It was the first real victory for the Iraqi forces themselves. This wasn't the Shia militias. This was the actual Iraqi army trained and equipped by the United States. So that could be an important milestone.
Well, it seems like ISIS is finally being taken seriously. For a long time, it seems like the president was calling them the JV squad, things like that. It took Paris, it took San Bernardino to really become aggressive, and that's too bad. And I think that's part of why Americans are very fearful, is it takes these major atrocities for something to happen.
And I think that the White House has gotten the message, although belatedly, as you point out, that they need to be talking with the American people constantly about this. And they have been very focused on it, but they haven't been communicating that to the American people. And I think people need that assurance that the government is doing everything possible to protect them. And, you know, the public are resilient and they're strong as long as they know that the government is doing everything possible. They can cope and deal with it, but they need that confidence that the government really is going after this aggressively.
It's just revealed that we, the United States, has been monitoring the phone calls of Netanyahu of Israel. Now, we had a big scandal about listening into the conversations of Angela Merkel or Hollande from France, and we said we're not going to do that anymore. How come Netanyahu?
Well, in the wake of the Angela Merkel allegations, I think what the administration recognized as members of Congress as well is that the growth of our capabilities had outpaced the policy deliberations about just because we can do something doesn't mean that we should do it. And what's the impact on our allies if we're reviewing their communications, what's the impact on the relationship? Is that outweighed by the intelligence we're getting? It's a very country-by-country specific determination. I can't comment on what countries the president has agreed to surveil or not surveil.
Let me ask you, just as a person, the idea that we were listening to Netanyahu, talking to members of Congress perhaps, talking to members of the community, is that right or wrong?
Well, I don't know that I can say, you know, globally, because, you know, a lot depends on the context of any particular surveillance. But I can say this, even among some of our closest allies that we may be spying on, they are also spying on us. So it's a bit like the phenomenon in Casablanca where people are shocked that there's gambling going on. I would be shocked that our allies were spying on us as much as they're shocked that we may be spying on them.
Do we have a moment to talk about the TSA and the announcement that many of us now have to go through those body scanners? It's not just an option now. And you have said time and time again, when it comes to the TSA, they need to get better at their jobs, because many times when they're tested, they fail. Do you still feel that way?
I do feel that way, although we have some new management at TSA, which I think is bringing about some very needed reforms. There have been training problems and there have been structural problems at TSA that I think they're in the process of correcting, and frankly, these steps that TSA has announced, I'm all for it. I fly all the time, like so many members of the public. I don't mind taking the extra time or having the extra inspection if it's going to mean I safely get to my destination. I'm willing to put up with that.
I think a lot of
we all
people would
should
agree with that one.
Yeah, except when you see a grandmother pulled aside.
Well,
these days you never even know, you know.
Specifically, you're here because you have a little bit of good news about earthquake awareness.
Yes, we got $8.2 million in the budget bill that was just passed to help build out this system so we get advance notice of earthquakes. And you might get a full minute of notice, or it might be a matter of seconds, depending on how far you are from the epicenter. But once this is built out, you can stop surgeries before something hits. You can stop a train or a light rail. You can stop sensitive manufacturing processes. So it can save lives.
Incredible.
It can save billions of dollars. And
how much is the cost for this?
Well, it'll cost about $38 million to build out and about $16 million a year to operate.
Oh, annually $16 million.
About annually $16 million.
And when would this begin?
Well, so far over the last couple of years, we've been able to get federal funding for about a third of the cost of the build-out. What we really need are the western states that will benefit from this to also provide their own funding to match what the federal government is doing. If they do that, this can be up and running in a matter of a few years. But frankly, we're already behind the ball. Mexico has a system like this up and running. Japan does.
I mean, a few seconds can really change everything.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
absolutely. You can move away from a window and get to a safe place.
Before you go, I don't know if you've said it or not. Bernie or Hillary, who are you supporting?
I'm with Hillary.
Okay.
I think she was a fabulous Secretary of State. I think a great president.
Not Martin O'Malley.
No.
Okay. All right. Congressman Schiff, always good to see you. Thank you very much. Adam Schiff.